Hello everyone, welcome to this week's Gran Turismo 7 Daily Race Race and Strategy Guide. We're back in the Group 3 machinery and we are off to Deep Forest in reverse. So not a track that is used that often in the game, although I do believe they've done both Group 4 and Group 3 around the reverse iteration of Deep Forest in Daily Race B, and we also did a GTWS manufacturers race a wee while ago. About 18 laps at that time, so it is used, but it's a bit of a quirky track as you shall find out. But this week's race we've got 14 laps to get round, tyre wear at times 7, fuel at times 2, medium and hard tyres are both available, both of which are mandatory, so you must run them for at least one lap during the race. BOP is on, it's the mid-speed BOP, damage is light, it's a rolling start, and slipstream hopefully is real this week rather than weak, which was a little bit farcical for the Super Formula race around Suzuka in my opinion, with it just being so overpowered. So hopefully we're back to real slipstream and we're not having to defend into every single braking zone. So before we go on to the strategy, I did do a good bit of car testing just to find out what cars I was comfortable driving around here, and just to give you a little thoughts of impressions on each of the ones that I did test. Now the current meta at the moment is the Ford GT40 from 2019, and yeah, I can definitely see the potential of this car around here. I think it will top the leaderboards, to be honest with you, but in my opinion it is a very, very tricky car to drive. It's very unpredictable at the hairpin. It's got some weird understeer that goes on as well. If you can master into that hairpin, I think you'll be in good shape because it is very fast around the rest of the track. But yeah, wasn't for me and I'm not going to use it for the testing. Toyota Supra was next, nice and stable. The Toyota Supra really good in the hairpin here. You can get nice and early on the throttle, but it does lack a little bit on the front end through the middle sector, and its acceleration in the lower gears is not ideal either. But in terms of lap time, we managed to kind of match what we did in the Ford GT. Nissan GTR from 2013, it used to be the car for every track. They did do a little bit of a nerf on it. Definitely off the pace here in my hands. I was never very good in this car even when it was the meta anyway, so probably not giving it a true representation, but for me not the car to be in, that's for sure. Next up we've got the Mercedes AMG, kind of performing just as you would expect the AMG to do. It's a jack of all trades, it's pretty good at everything, excellent at none of them, but yeah, acceleration was good, the handling was good, no quirky understeer, pretty handy in the hairpin as well. I was on top of the lap time, so I set a similar kind of lap times to the Supra and the GT40 pretty quickly in the Mercedes. And yeah, this is going to be the car that we're going to use as we go forward with the testing. But we did test a few other cars. When we did the GTWS manufacturers race, the Suzuki VGT was top of the leaderboards. It was absolutely dominant in the race if you happen to come up against one. Very, very fast in a straight line. Initially when I drove it, it felt awful, but quite quickly I managed to kind of work out how to drive this car. You've got to short shift it, you've got to do some weird gear changes with it, but again, within about 4 or 5 laps, we were down into the same kind of lap times as the GT40, the Mercedes, and the Supra. And the tyre wear on that car is insane, like insanely good. So if you can get top of that car, you're going to be able to do a lot of laps on the medium tyres. Can't do any kind of car testing in Group 3 without testing the Porsche. It's a weapon around most of the track except this hairpin, where it is an absolute nightmare. Again, you can get top of this car around that hairpin, you can make this car do some good lap times, but yeah, it just seemed awful in the hairpin for me every single time. I decided, yeah, Mercedes, nice stable car, 14 laps to get around, pretty decent tyre wear. I want a car that's predictable, I want a car that I can rely on, and the Mercedes AMG kind of ticked those boxes for me, so it will be the test car as we move on to taking a look at the strategy. So for this one, there's no stop available, it's a one-stop strategy. It's just how are we going to perform that one-stop strategy is the question. Now normally, when I do the medium hard strategy, I would have done some laps on the hard tyres to give myself a benchmark. Once I kind of reach that benchmark, I know it's time to come off the medium tyres and move on to the hard tyres, but I didn't do it on this occasion. But I was kind of thinking, you know what, 1 second off the pace is going to be around about where we're going to have to come in for the hard tyres. So you're looking at around about laps maybe 7 if you're really bad on the tyres, lap 8 for a lot of people, maybe even lap 9 that we went on to here, where you get that kind of changeover from your worn mediums to your fresh hards. Coming into the pits now, it's not a particularly long pit stop here to be honest with you. 4 wheels and tyres are changed. We're going to come out here. You don't have to worry too much about coming into the pits as well. Just make sure you're over to the right hand side of the track as you come out the last corner. You shouldn't have any problems with the white line. Do be careful as you exit as well. Remember, you're coming on to a long straight. Cars are going to be at a much higher speed than you coming into here if they're currently on the racetrack, but no problems with the white line. All in all, you're going to lose 15.6 seconds in the pits when you make that stop, and fuel is going to be no issue whatsoever. So how do these hard tyres perform in relation to our medium tyres? So 1 minute 27.2, 1 minute 27.3, very consistent here on the hard tyres. That kind of matches up with the sort of lap time we did there on lap 8. So lap 7 on the mediums, the worn mediums, was faster than we were doing on the hard tyres, but lap 8 was actually slower. So as I said, depending on what car you're in, what input device you're using and how your driving style is, you're looking at around about lap 7, 8 or 9 to change from those mediums on to the hard tyres, and we'll talk about that in a little bit further on in the video when we kind of look at the strategy options. 20 minutes and 42 seconds was the race finishing time, so good to have a decent length daily race C after last week's 16-minute race in the Super Formulas around Suzuka. So let's move on to taking a look at the hard medium strategy and just how big a undercut can you actually do. Now, if you notice the tyre wear on our previous run, where we started on the mediums, moved on to the hards, we pitted at the end of lap 9, but you will have noted if you looked, there was actually still quite a lot of the tread left. We certainly went down to the canvas on those medium tyres, so there was definitely another couple of laps in them, albeit they've probably been performing worse than a fresh set of hard tyres, which is why we came into the pits. But it did make me think, just how big an undercut can we actually perform? So for this run here, we decided we'd pit at the end of lap 4. 4 laps on the hard tyres, that means 10 laps on the medium tyres, and as we join the footage here on the last lap, or halfway around the last lap, this means we're on our 10th lap on those medium tyres, and as you can see from the telemetry in the bottom right hand corner, we have plenty of tread left on them. There's definitely at least 2 more laps in these tyres if we really needed to push the mediums that far. So certainly 12 laps are possible on the medium tyres, albeit they probably will be performing quite slow by that point comparison to a set of fresh hard tyres. But if we look at our lap times at the moment, they do bear in mind I had to negotiate some traffic at times. I think I had to, on lap 13, we had to overtake a back marker. But lap 14 here is going to be a 1:27.4, and if you remember the hard tyre pace at the end of the last run, we were doing 1 minute 27.3, so even the 10th lap on the medium tyres doing the hard medium strategy is still as fast, or nearly as fast as a set of hard tyres. So interesting, this one. Normally with this kind of tyre wear model we're kind of bookmarked into a very sort of limited scope of strategy, but in this one definitely seems to be a much wider scope in terms of what you can do, in terms of running the tyres a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, try to get an undercut in. But here is the strategy options as far as I can see them. First up, we've got our optimal strategy. So this is the strategies where your tyre performance is going to be optimal. The sort of strategy you would run if you've got no traffic to worry about, you've got a clear track and you can just put in your own pace. If you start on the mediums, which I'm only really going to do if you're starting well towards the front of the grid, you're looking at 7 to 8 laps on the mediums and then 6 to 7 laps on the hard tyres. Again, depends on your car, depends on your input device, depends on your driving style, how many laps you're going to go on those mediums. If you're starting on the hard tyres, your optimal strategy, I would go an extra lap on the mediums. I would definitely be doing 8 laps on the mediums, so that means 6 laps on the hard tyres to start off with, and then moving on to the mediums. In terms of undercut strategies, there's quite a large scope here as we seen from the test footage. I reckon you could, if you really wanted to, you've got the driving style, you're in the right kind of car, you probably could just do 1 lap on the hard tyres and then 13 on the mediums. But I think for most people, a good undercut strategy is kind of what we did, at kind of 4 laps on the hard tyres, 10 laps on the mediums. But as I've put on the screen there, I think there's a kind of scope to do 2 to 5 laps on the hard tyres, 9 to 12 laps on the mediums, just depending on how your race is unfolding. If at the end of lap 2 it's absolute chaos in front of you, get into those pits, get rid of those hard tyres and see if you can make the medium tyres last 12 laps. You're better off running in clean air and dealing with the tyre wear at the end than dealing with the chaos sometimes. But I think that about wraps it up for the strategy. As I said earlier on, nice to have a little bit of flexibility in there with the strategy where you can actually make something work a little bit try and avoid the traffic, as I said, try and avoid the chaos. Much more my kind of race. I've never been a big fan of these ones where you just run the medium tyres or the softer compound down to the tread and then just do the rest of the race on the harder compound. Pretty much limits the strategy options, and it does feel a little bit different in this one, which is very nice to see indeed. Let's finish off the video as always with a lap guide. We're in the Mercedes AMG. It's a 126.195, which is not particularly great pace. I just don't have great pace around here. I'm kind of struggling for pace overall in the game at the moment, but I'll give you my tips and advice on how to get a car around this track. Coming into turn 1, you're looking for that curb on the left hand side. As you kind of see that, come off the throttle a little bit, try and get the car over to the left hand side of the track, all the way down into first gear for the hairpin. It's a funny old hairpin that, honestly. It doesn't work with the physics in this game. The cars do far too many strange things. If you can get on top of that in the right car like the GT40 or the Porsche, could be in the box seats, but as it is, I prefer the stability of an MR car. Start the curb for the right-hander here. Tighter corner than you might expect. Easy to get on the throttle, too early and understeer here. Try and avoid this curb on most cars, just to lift off the throttle, cut that big chunk off there, get the car onto the green strip, and then you're down a couple of gears as you're kind of turning to the right hand side, but then you're throwing the car into the left. The white line across the track is your reference here. Take a chunk of the grass on the inside, and now you're just threading the needle through this somewhat bizarre, rather unnatural last sector. Once you kind of get into the flow of the track, it's actually not too bad fun. You're looking for the first of the orange markers on the wall on the left hand side as your braking reference for the last corner. Again, a corner that kind of lures you into getting onto the throttle nice and early and can quite easily understeer there. So get the car, bit of a point and squirt kind of corner, get the car in, get it pointed in the right direction, and then get the acceleration all the way down this long straight, back up to the somewhat nightmarish hairpin of Deep Forest Reverse, as it's going to be known. It's not a sort of corner like the Death Chicane that's going to take you out all the time, but I think it's going to build up as big a reputation as this week unfolds. But all in all, a pretty decent race, I think. Some different cars in there, some different strategy that you can maybe try and work something if you're in a bit of trouble with the traffic. We'll definitely be live streaming this a couple of times this week. Do join me for them if you can, and if you found the video useful in some way, shape or form, please hit that like button, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you very much for watching.